Is Social Security spying on you? Do they have black helicopters flying over you 24 hours a day, like a scene out of Goodfellas or something? We're going to talk about that today. All right, so I'm going to try to go down this as quickly as possible. There's some videos out there that are talking specifically about this, that Social Security is spying on you and stuff. And I just want to clear the air. We've got enough stress and anxiety out there, so we don't need to perpetuate more. But there are certain cases that Social Security does look at you. They're called CDIs, particular investigative units, the Office of the Inspector General, Social Security employees themselves. And for most of the people out there watching are probably saying, well, good, that's good. Once they know what the list is. Well, maybe the last one might not be a little bit, might be a little questionable. All right. The first thing is if you are receiving disability and you're essentially not entitled to that disability because you're working, because Social Security defines disability as the inability to work. And if you're out there making a whole bunch of money receiving disability benefits, then obviously you shouldn't be receiving those benefits. And what happens is the Social Security Administration gets some type of tip. Your neighbor, or usually it's a former spouse or a former lover or something like that, wants to drop the dime on you and says you're working and stuff. So Social Security, what they do, they don't immediately necessarily go out there and start spying on people. They just do the regular rigmarole. They check the records, they check financial records, because when you file for types of disability, you essentially allow Social Security to review that type of stuff, your earnings record and everything. So the first step is they send out a work report, or they send out a medical CDR, a continuing disability review, and then you fill it out. And, usually when we get those reports, usually it's again, just a disgruntled neighbor or a coworker, ex or something like that, because you are allowed to work and collect Social Security benefits, even though I just said you're not allowed to work, but you are allowed to work limited. And I put together a guide. It's called Work Incentives. Congress has determined we want people to go back to work. It's good for them. It's good for the Disability Trust Fund, because you're not getting disability benefits. You pay taxes. We all love it when you pay taxes. So Social Security, Congress has determined a lot of ways, work incentives, that you can do to see if you can go back to work. So when people are doing those and they do everything 100% correctly, and then I've got the entire checklist, I've got an entire step process. It tells you the difference between a trial work period and the extended period of eligibility and substantial gainful activity and all this other kind of stuff. And I put this worksheet together here that goes through the entire process. And that way you do everything correctly and you don't get an overpayment, but you're able to see if you can go back to work. And I've got this link. This is 100% free. A lot of people say, well, if you download my newsletter or something, or if you subscribe, I give you this, that, and the other. Just go ahead and take it and use it. Share it, please. I've got it in my YouTube description. This is an updated one. I just did this one a couple of days ago, but someone said they wanted a little bit more information on self-employment. So I added self-employment. Step number 6. What if I'm self-employed? A lot of people have said, hey, I sell some stuff on Etsy or online or something like that. What do I do for self-employment? So I forget who asked me to add self-employment, but thank you. And I did. So this is a work in progress. So use it 100% free. So, and subscribe and like and share the channel if appreciate it. So you are allowed to work. A lot of the times, Social Security is contacted about, hey, my neighbor's working and he's receiving disability benefits. And we go out there and say, yeah, well, the person is working because they're trying to see if they go back to work and everything is good. So, but sometimes people are not receiving disability are receiving disability when they're not supposed to. And that's when these CDIs, it's a kind of a unit, Office of the Inspector General, and there's usually a Office of the Inspector General person in charge of this little unit, and there's 50 of them across the United States, Puerto Rico and Guam and stuff. And then there's also someone, usually a little Social Security employee, that's also added on there, and there's a DDS person, and so that's a team of about 3 or 4 or 5 people or stuff, and they are throughout the country. And come on, Social Security staffing is so very low. You have to, in order to trigger them to even start looking at you or come knock on your door or something like that, you have to be doing something very bad. And for those people out there, yeah, I guess you should be paranoid. But the most of the people out there, if you're working a little bit, you're allowed to work as long as you stay, under those limits. You've got nothing to worry about. Social Security is not, spying on you. They don't have the black helicopters. Social Security can barely stay above water now. They can barely answer the phone after 3 or 4 hours. Do you think they're, hiding in your trash can? Come on. Yeah, the social media people out there, stop stressing people out. All right. So disability. Um, and in terms of retirement, you can get an overpayment. You can do things wrong if you are receiving early retirement benefits and working. And for those particular cases, yeah, nobody goes out there and looks at you or anything like that. Social Security doesn't have that staff, and it's not necessary anyway, because once you do your taxes, then Social Security is notified the following year. And then if you have an overpayment, if you're paid too much, I did a video on overpayments yesterday, and people say, how did people get overpaid? Well, that's how they get overpaid. They work on disability and they work over the limits, or they work on they work while they're receiving retirement benefits and they work over the limits. Some people do as a strategic thing, and but so that's how people get overpaid. But in terms of people spying on you, early retirement, no, yeah, no, yeah, don't worry about that. There was a thing of quite a few years ago. So if you've ever heard about this, forget about it. It's called questionable retirement. Social Security used to do this about 15 years ago, where someone would come in and they would file for early retirement. And I've had cases like this, and they were like an electrical engineer, and the spouse has been essentially, in this particular case, was a stay at home mom. She graduated high school. He has a PhD in electrical engineering, and he wanted his benefits to start early. So he says, I'm no longer doing the electrical engineering business I have. I've given it over to my wife. Um, Convenient, right? Because he wanted to start his benefits. So the idea was, well, is she an electrical engineer? No. Then that questionable retirement. But Social Security determined that those are too difficult to kind of ask about, and Social Security employees were kind of messing those up on a regular basis. So there is no such thing as questionable retirement anymore. So if you ever hear anybody talk about that, oh, I had that 10 years ago and they did this and they don't, Social Security doesn't do that anymore. So another way that Social Security may start looking at you is if you are a payee for someone. So Social Security, if you're not able to take care of your own benefits, you can get someone to be assigned your representative payee. And if that representative payee does not use those benefits for your welfare, then yes, Social Security will start looking at you. The first step in stuff like this is they send out a payee report to kind of document it. So they'll send out a payee report to that representative payee and say, "Hey, we've sent you $20,000 over the last 12 months for this particular person. What did you do with it?" And they write in, "Oh yeah, I gave it housing and food and yada yada yada." And they use that as proof that, oh, wait a second, we heard that this person is homeless, where are you using that money? So yeah, if you do stuff like that, Social Security just might look at you. Not the black helicopters, but they'll definitely look at you. And yes, if one of the cases that they're talking about in social media is if you are collecting checks for someone that is no longer amongst us, yes, then yes, Social Security is eventually going to come looking at you, and you see, go into your state newspaper and then type in local woman Social Security fraud or something like that, and I'm sure you will find a case over the last 10 or 15 years of people collecting checks for relatives, mothers, fathers, uncles that were deceased. It does happen. My office was the third busiest office in the country. It doesn't happen very often. My office is the third busiest office in the country, and I think probably we had one in every 3 years or so. I think one in about 10 years was actually one of those cases where they had a storage unit and there was a 55-gallon drum in the storage unit, and you can fill out the rest of the story. I think that was the first one in about 10 years. So yes, it does happen. Yes, people, yes, they do that. And Social Security eventually finds out. All right. And I guess the last one that people are spying on you, we don't know, is Doge and all the people that got access to all of our Social Security records, are how much how much we're receiving, if we're receiving benefits, where we were born, how much we earn through our life, who we're married to, who we're divorced from, where we're living now, our address, our bank accounts. We don't know whether how much of that information they got. The Government Accountability Office is now doing a review to see what information was given out to these people. They've limited it right now to the Department of Labor, but hopefully the Government Accountability Office looks also at Social Security Administration and to find out who got what of our information. I know there is a movement to do a Freedom of Information Act. So anybody can do a Freedom of Information Act. You just fill it out. You go into FOIA, type that in, and you can ask the government, say, hey, who did you give my information out to? And you can do that. So I guess there's a movement to do that, to kind of expose, what's going on with all this, our private information. So super long story short, unless you're doing something very, very bad, you're good. If you're doing something bad, then stop doing it. But there's not going to be, black helicopters following you around. So there's that. Stop stressing. Social media stops stressing people out there.